10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lights in action. Great, thank you. So, welcome to another morning's talk here at Jhana Grove. And for today's talk, I've actually got an idea of what I'm going to talk about. I usually give this talk once during the Rains retreat, and I think now's the correct time to do it. And in brief, those people who have heard it before and who want to leave now, don't. Please lock the door. Now that's on those 1,000 petal lotus simile. And I'm talking like this today is because a lot of people, you always want some kind of direction of how to meditate, what to do, and how it works and why it works. And this is just one beautiful way of describing it. And it ties in with that little story which I mentioned yesterday about the Emperor's 3 questions. Do you remember that one? When is the most important time? Who is the most important person? Who? That's the one who's right in front of you. And what's the most important thing to do? To care. So what's that got to do with meditation? First of all, of course, now is the most important time. Forget what happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future. Now is the only time you ever have. And number 2, what's the most important meditation object? What should you be watching? Nothing? The breath or what? No, whatever's right in front of you. So you close your eyes. Now what you're aware of right now. You don't need to choose. What you're aware of, and then what do you do with it? Simple, care for it. You don't do anything. You care for it. In other words, you look at it with this beautiful sense of kindness, which means you don't change it, you don't try and get rid of it, you don't sort of try and grab onto it, you just are kind to it. It's not just letting go, it's adding that little bit extra of kindness. And when you add that kindness to whatever you're doing, it kind of stays with you and becomes satisfying and actually develops. When you don't do anything, it doesn't mean that nothing happens. It means that things start to disappear and vanish. A good example of that, I'll tell this anecdote first of all, that once when I was meditating in a Zen monastery in the north of England, it was called Throstle Hole. I was meditating there because basically you didn't have much choice in those days. Whatever place you can get to, you went. And so I'd never done Zen meditation before, but I knew how to meditate. But then you were supposed to sit down and keep your eyes open and stare at the wall. I hadn't got a clue what I was supposed to do, so I did nothing. It's really lovely that you didn't have much information. So when I had my eyes fully open, just looking at this whitewashed wall of a barn, then after about 10 or 15 minutes, the wall vanished. It just disappeared. It's like these walls behind me. They're solid. They're not supposed to disappear. That's not in the warranty. You try and get insurance against vanishing walls, and they think you're crazy. But that's actually what happened to the wall. It totally disappeared. And I was kind of stunned, but I was at that age, adventurous. I was always willing to see something new and not afraid of it. And see walls which they're 1 minute, and right in front of your open eyes, then suddenly disappeared. That was crazy, that was weird, that was so wonderful for insight. Because what happened is that whatever doesn't move vanishes. The ambient sound in the background. You may be able to hear it now, but if it doesn't change, you're not aware of it anymore. I've got now the feeling, as I'm sitting here, the feeling in my bottom, pressed against the cushion. And you know my size, I can feel that very easily. I always say, Ajahn Brahm, you should watch your weight. It's much easier to watch when you've got more of it. Oh, come on. and so, after a while, the feeling disappears. And I realize that's the nature of the five senses. Actually, all the senses, but I'll bring that up in a moment. When you have a sense and nothing changes, it vanishes. It turns off. And having my eyes open in a zendo in the north of England, that made it so clear what was happening. You know, it happens all the time. I close my eyes. The first thing I notice when I close my eyes is the inside of my eyelids. That only lasts a few seconds and then it vanishes because nothing moves. That's actually why things disappear. And when they disappear, you have no sight, it turns off. You can't hear, you can't smell, taste, or have any feelings on your body, touch. The five senses vanish. And that gives you an indication of what this meditation is supposed to be about. Now is the only time you have. The thing right in front of you, the most important, and just to care about it. If whatever you're watching, if you give it that importance and you care about it, it vanishes all by itself. Simply because it's not dangerous, it doesn't move. And then it vanishes, and then what's left? What's inside? And that gives you an idea of the simile of the 1,000-petaled lotus. But you take this practice of now, the only time you have, what's in front of me is most important, you just care about it. So what happens when I close my eyes to meditate, you know, the first thing which I'm always aware of is my body. That's right in front of me all the time. Because, you know, my awareness is actually kind of tied to my body. You got an ache in my knees, or an ache in the head, or you're cold somewhere because it's a cool morning. You can feel those things, and they come up straight away. So what do? Give them importance, don't try and get away from them, and be kind to them. It's happening right now. What's happening right now is the most important meditation object. So you don't choose, you just give it kindness and care. And when you care for it, it's very easy to engage with it. And usually, it just after a little while, it just disappears. Why? Well, it's not a threat to you. Your brain has been developed over so many of lifetimes, or maybe call it just how the human body develops. If something is a danger or threatening you, then the senses get very alert. But if nothing is threatening you at all, they kind of disappear. That's why we have a non-threatening retreat center for you. We have a non-threatening meditation hall for you. Sometimes people ask, is this what it was like in Thailand? I said, no, not at all. In Thailand, there were snakes and other animals crawling around, and also mosquitoes. So anybody who wants to know what it felt like in Thailand, I'm always sort of getting one room and putting a few snakes in there, turning off the lights, and having lots and lots of mosquitoes, so you can get the experience of what it's like, you know, going to the tropics. A few of our monks are down there at the moment, aren't they? They're crazy, they should have stayed here, it's much nicer. They want the experience. Okay, get it out of your system, have a few snakes crawling over you, and then afterwards you say, okay, I think I prefer abiding in a monastery. Nice and safe. But anyhow, once things disappear, you understand what meditation is all about, letting everything vanish and see what's underneath, what's in the center. So, the simile of the 1,000-petaled lotus. Once upon a time there was a little lotus and somebody saw it, and when they saw that lotus, it was all closed up. What's what lotuses do? Please let me know, but do you actually call them the plural of lotus, lotuses? Or or lotusi, or loti. What's a... Anyway, I'll let that idea disappear. But when you see it, all the lotus flowers are always closed up at night. And then you look mindfully at the outside of that lotus. The outermost sheath of petals is always rough. And it's kind of corrugated. It does that because that has to be the toughest layer of petals to protect all the finer petals inside. And in the early morning, the sun comes up and it warms that lotus. Just like I saw many of you this morning, even before breakfast, standing in the sun, and it warmed you up. And what happened? Jackets came off, blankets were discarded, so you could enjoy the sun. That's what happens with the lotus. When it first meets the warmth and the light of the sun, the outermost protective layer of petals opens up. So you can see the next layer of petals in the lotus. And that next layer of petals in the lotus is more smooth, more coloured, and it's more fragrant. You go up to smell it, and sometimes it's delightful. Even just the outermost petals is more beautiful. It doesn't have to protect against all the elements, the wind and the dust, and animals walking past it and bumping into it. The innermost are far more subtle. But this is just the first inner layer of petals. And the sun keeps on shining, gets warmer, and that too opens up. So you can see the next layer of petals, and that can receive the warmth and light of the sun, so that can open up as well. And the layer of petals opens up one after the other. You don't make it open up, you don't get your hand and peel it, you just leave it to open up by itself, otherwise you might damage it. And it does open up, as long as there's the light and the warmth of the sun. And the deeper you go in, the more beautiful, the more fragrant, and even the more thinner those petals. Now, what does that mean for meditation? Like you are that lotus. And you want to open yourself up to see what's inside. What's inside the body? I don't mean physically like an anatomist. Even though that, I don't know if I told you that story, that somebody told me that they were in Adelaide and they went to the biggest bookshop in Adelaide to look for my first book, The Opening the Door of Your Heart. And they went into the section there, the religion, self-help, whatever, and they couldn't find it in there. So they went to the counter and I said, I thought you had a copy of this. I rang up earlier. And so they went on their computer. Yeah, they did have a copy of Opening the Door of the Heart in that bookshop, but they put it in the medical section for heart surgery. They did. I kind of like that idea, having one of my books in the medical section. Anyway, I don't know what do you put good, bad, who knows in? Is like confusion, mental illness. Anyway, so with the lotus opening up, how come it opens up? Just the light and the heat of the sun. What does that mean in this simile? You're the lotus. The light means the mindfulness, and the heat means the kindness. You know, that inner warmth. And if you have kindfulness and mindfulness, and what do I call that? Kindfulness, the two together. And you shine it just on a thing like yourself, you find you can go inside. You're first of all mindful of your body, but not just aware of it, but kind to it as well, caring for it. Now honestly, that's what I do. I usually start with my feet because it's nice to get started there and build up the energy. So when you go to the more important parts of the body, you've got lots of mindfulness and kindness to actually relax everything. So I feel my feet. It's amazing just how, with some awareness, how that mindfulness can grow and be of great benefit to you. There was one monk here many years ago who, whenever he meditated, would always have a sore back. So, he went to see the doctors and stuff. They gave him CT scans and everything. And then they came to tell him he has a congenital deformity of his spine, and there's no way that he can sit comfortably for more than about 10 or 15 minutes. It's a physical problem, but inoperable. So they advised him, don't meditate, don't sit on the floor. And that's like telling a cook not to eat. So he couldn't do that, so he tried to find another way of curing the problem of a very sore back. And he found this one book by a New Zealand physiotherapist, which was brilliant. It's called, I think, Heal Your Own Back. And they said for people like you who've got congenital deformities in your spine, what to do on either side of the spine. They had good diagrams in the book. There's diagrams of just on either side of your spine, there were these muscles which most of us don't even know exist. And they pointed out where they were, and they said for 15 minutes on either side of your spine every morning, take your hand and rub that area. Just stroke it on either side. Until after a while you can start to feel those muscles. You're getting a neural connection with those muscles. And once you can start to feel them without touching, it took him about 3 months to achieve that first stage, so he could actually be aware of those. Just like I'm aware of my knees, I'm aware of my feet, but some muscles are not really important, so I don't know what they're doing. And haven't even got that connection with them at all. But he made that connection with the muscles on either side of his spine. And the next task, now you can feel them, move them, exercise them, stretch them, relax them, stretch them, relax them. That took him another 3 months to do. And he said, once you can do that, you can just, at will, just exercise those muscles, push them this way, push them that way. And soon they got so strong because of that exercise, they totally compensated for the weakness in his spine. He had no problem anymore. And that was just an example of mindfulness gets you connected with your body, and the kindness does amazing things. It can heal it. So that's what I do with my feet, relax them, ankles, relax them, sweeping up the body, relaxing everything. And that, by the time you get to your face, this is my experience, everything is so beautifully relaxed. And remember, look, this is my 74th year, and my 73rd birthday some time ago. I'm an old monk. If I tell dad jokes, I don't tell dad jokes, I tell granddad jokes. But then I start my meditation like that, just being peaceful and relaxing. Then all the feelings in the muscles and everywhere else in the body tends to vanish. And when it starts to vanish, there's no tension anywhere. And also other story about the man who went to see his psychiatrist. And he said, sometimes I'm sure I'm a marquee. You know what a marquee is? Sometimes they have these events, and that's where inside they have the tables and the cups of tea and coffee. Other times I feel I'm a teepee. That's like a wigwam. You know what the indigenous Indians in the US used to live in. Sometimes I think I'm a marquee, sometimes I think I'm a teepee. And the doctor said, well, I know your problem, it's very common these days. You're 2 tents. I told you it was granddad jokes. Okay, you're rubbing your head, Venerable, so I can understand that. But anyway, all that tension inside of you, you can feel it. And it's so easy to relax. if you have a headache, just be aware of it, send it huge amounts of kindness, and the whole head just kind of relaxes and becomes at ease. So all those feelings, no matter where they are, no matter what they are, they can disappear. So when they're gone, then what have you left? You've opened up the outermost sheath of the lotus, which protects what's inside. Then you get to your mental world. And mental world, one of the first things which I notice is like time. And just how many of us are prisoners of time? We take time so seriously. We get very tense again. Wigwam or Marky, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, we get so tense trying to make sure we get there on time. You know, as a senior monk, I don't have to get there on time. I always say the talk will not start without me. But nevertheless, it's just out of kindness. If I make a promise, then I will make sure I try and keep that promise. That was one memory I have from one of my school friends, one of my oldest friends, who came to see me in Thailand. And he didn't know really what to expect. He just came to visit me in the northeast of Thailand. And I gave him a nice room. And after the evening meeting, I took him back so he knew where to go, so he can take a nice rest. And I said, look, one thing, when you're in this part of the world, you shouldn't miss the morning alms round. It's just after dawn. The monks walk quietly into the village, and the villagers all give you a little bit of rice each, silently, which they've been doing for hundreds of years. And he said, I'd love to go on a morning alms round, but, I work in London. I don't get up at dawn. I won't be able to get up in time. And I just told him, look, I'll be at the door of your room at this particular time, just before we go on alms round. So you'll have plenty of time to get dressed and go to the toilet and then come out with us. And there's a simple little promise like that. But I remember the following day he told me, it was such a weird experience when I went to bed that last night. I knew you'd be there at that particular time. In London with all my friends and compatriots, that they might say that they'll be there at dawn, but you can't trust that. A lot of the time they don't turn up in time. But because you're a monk and I've seen you behave, I know you'll be there at that time. You actually keep promises. And I took that for granted. Now living in a monastery with all these amazing monks, you always know that the time they say they'll be there. And unless there's been a nuclear disaster in Bodhinyana monastery or something, but I don't think there has been, has there? No, good. So that was one of the first times I really saw some of the benefits of being trustworthy. If you make a promise, you keep it as best you possibly can. So anyway, that is a beautiful thing to see in the morning, this ancient tradition still alive. So quiet, so peaceful. And sometimes I felt guilty when I first became a monk. I said, I'm taking food from these very poor people. I'm smart enough, fit enough, I could make some money and help them. And what happened one day after I'd been a monk just for a few weeks, that we were all invited to a person's house for the lunch, the one meal a day. So we never went on alms round. But we forgot to tell the villagers. And so in the afternoon the villagers came, the headman, a formal delegation, to ask forgiveness. Said, what did we do which offended you? You've done nothing to offend us, but you didn't come on alms round this morning to our village. Why? I'm just sorry, please. And one of the first time you realized just how much they loved that alms round. It didn't matter if they were poor, they'd always find a little bit of rice each to give us. And that was so important to them, the connection between them and their monks. some years later, a member of the BBC team came to do a documentary about this monastery in the northeast of Thailand. And I forget who the main interviewer was, but he really was smart. And he said, those villagers in Thailand, they regard their monastery like you'd regard your football team. You're so proud of them, and you really want them to do well and win. That's even here in the Buddhist Society of Western Australia, or those of you who just come here. You love your team, the monks and the nuns, and you say, "Go girls, go!" I don't mean just depart, I mean just get in there and get some nice deep meditation. And the same with the monks as well. You're very proud of them. And that's one aspect of the relationship between the lay supporters and the Sangha, which I never realized until they did that documentary. But anyhow, it's a beautiful thing to be able to see how the lay communities, ancient lay communities, even like in the old days in Sri Lanka and here, even right here, one of the nice things about this community here, that I've been living here, I think about 42 years now. And so all our lay people here, and their kids, and their grandkids, and they trust you. And because they trust you, if they get into any trouble, I really love being able to serve them and help them in a way which no one else can. An example of that was when this young lady came to see me. She was at university. I've seen her and her parents when they were young as well. And she came up to me and said, "Ajahn Brahm, can I talk to you? I'm in big trouble," she said. "I need to talk to you." I said, "Yeah, sure." I've known her for a long time. And she said, actually ever since she was about 6 inches high, then they do that. They come and bring their babies to the monastery. And some places in Thailand, they have this tradition of actually offering their baby to the monk. That's one of the scariest things I ever do. It's like, to say, I want to offer like a baptism, your disciple. But this is a baby. I say, okay, very good, pat it on the head and give it back before it poos in my robe. Because once it does, it's really hard to get it out, the smell. You've only got one robe. So, anyway, this particular lady, she said her problem was that she was pregnant with her boyfriend at university. And I said, "Have you told your mum and dad yet?" And she said, "No, that's why I've come to see you. Can you please tell them for me?" I was it's weird, I felt honoured. And I said, "Of course I can do that for you, how I can be of service." And so I told the mum and dad. And I said, "Why don't you tell them?" And she said, "They'd kill me if they found out. They'd be so upset." And that really just gave me this insight into why people lie. Why didn't you tell the truth? Because if my partner found out, they'd kill me if they found out. And of course your parents will be embarrassed when they find out you're pregnant or not happy, but they should never sort of scold you. You've had the guts to come and tell them. You made a mistake, but we all make mistakes somewhere in life. And when we do, we need people like parents to help us, to get us out of that jam. And I told the parents off. And I said, "Why is your daughter you love and care for, why is she so afraid of you?" And I realized that's why people do tell lies to one another. Because we make it so they're afraid of telling the truth. And to this day, whenever I do a marriage ceremony, people to bind together, I tell them, please, if ever you have kids, or even right now, between the two of you, please, always make this vow that if your partner tells you the truth, you'll never scold them. You never punish them in any which way. You'd be disappointed, upset what they did, but at least they told the truth to you. which means you can work out solutions together rather than always doubting one another. No, not lying is one of our precepts. Why do people lie? Because you think that that's much better than facing a scolding or punishment. So please be truthful. And as long as there's truth, there's that kind of amnesty in a family. And then you can work it out, how to do better. But anyway, going back to the first layer of petals, the body, after a while that mostly disappears. And that mostly disappears, you're sitting here. What are you aware of? A lot of times you can actually see that much of what bothers us at the beginning, the past and the future, time, and to be able to be free of that, we have to go into the center of that time, now. And how do you do that? The kindness has to come first. As I said yesterday, when you're kind to the past and kind to the future, give it a positive spin. Anyone who's hurt them, just find out mitigating circumstances. They're in a bad mood, they're having difficulties, or maybe say, I misunderstood what they said. But even stretch the truth as far as you can, and just to find ways of forgiveness, letting it go. Maybe it wasn't exactly what you expected. Or maybe what you saw, was just a coincidence. Can I make another of my confessions? Many years ago, people should like it, confessions. Isn't that exciting? What's Ajahn Brahm been up to this time? And this time I was teaching meditation in one of the prisons in Bunbury. But the time when they could have their class was in the evening. The time I could travel down there was in the afternoon. So I had a couple of spare hours, nothing to do. And one nice afternoon, it's actually about this time of year, and I went down to the Bunbury beach. No one was there at all. It was a bit, south of the city, so it was just so peaceful there. So I sat down and crossed my legs to meditate. I was meditating for a couple of hours, a nice deep meditation. And afterwards, when I came out of meditation, oh my goodness, I noticed there was someone sitting next to me on my left. And I took a glance, and I couldn't believe it. The person sitting on my left was this young 17-year-old blonde in a bikini. I looked to my right, and there was this brunette, long-haired, 17-year-old, also in a bikini. I had these two young, beautiful, bikini-clad girls sitting next to me on a beach. I don't know if you know the Thai newspapers, but if there's any Thai newspaper took a shot of me, I'd have been in big trouble. How can you explain that? You know what was happening? It was the last day of the pre-university exams. There was a high school on the opposite side of the road. And that's why when I went there, they were just busy studying, doing their exams. I didn't know they were about to finish. To me, at that time, all the beach was vacant. But anyway, they all came out after the exams, the final exam, they're finished. And they put on their bathers, it's a nice warm day, and they went to play in the beach. And to celebrate, end of exams. Only two of them, they saw this brown-figured, bald-headed person sitting on the beach. They didn't know who the heck I was. And I wasn't moving, I was still inside. I didn't notice them coming past. I was inside. And I remember they said, well, we saw you sitting so still, and we really wanted to find out what you're up to, because they'd never seen anything like that before. So they just very quietly sat next to me on either side, no escape. I waited till I came out of meditation to talk to them. And at that particular time, again, it was very hard to explain. I had nothing to do with this. I was just sitting down by myself a couple of hours ago, and then these two ladies It's either side of me to talk. So anyhow, fortunately, I answered a few words and said I had to go now to escape, in case somebody took a photograph of me. But anyhow, that was one of the sort of things which a monk gets into quite innocently. But anyhow, so things disappear, and that's what happened to me. I was just sitting on the beach, quiet, peaceful. So the body had disappeared, but the next thing which disappears is time. You're perfectly aware in this moment, but you haven't got a clue of how many hours you're sitting there. And of course that's very nice because you don't have any feelings of you've got to get somewhere, you've got to do something, or feelings of, oh, what did I do this morning? And you're tortured by the past. Instead of doing that, you just let the whole lot go. And just in this moment, you're not asleep. You're perfectly awake. But inside, you've gone into that freedom from time. Imagine if you didn't have any worries about time. No worries about when lunch is. No worries about when to sleep. No worries about appointments you have tomorrow or next week. That time has no meaning for you. That's one of the reasons we don't have any clocks on the walls here, although we do have 2 clocks in that walking meditation room. Have you seen those 2 clocks? Those are the most accurate clocks in the whole world. And sometimes when people ask me what the time is now minutes past now AM on the 9th day of the 9th month, 2000 and now. What's the difference? Honestly, does 2024 feel any different than 2012? We make the illusion of time, and it's lovely to be free of it. So you can just sit down there. You don't even have any concept of how long you want to sit for. You just sit here and just become free. Instead of sitting down, okay, it's now 8:37. I'm gonna beat my personal best. You know when actually you do get your longest sit, you haven't got a clue. You never decide to do that, it just happens. I like it when that occurs. You're just sitting down there and just you open your eyes afterwards. That was a nice meditation. It was really blissful. And then you look at the clock. No, it can't be right. You hit the clock, but it is right. And you haven't been asleep. You've been perfectly awake. For those of you who want to have the test, that you have a nice meditation, you think it's a nice meditation, were you sleeping or were you just peaceful? How do you feel afterwards? If you're kind of dull when you come out, that was sleep. But if you're perfectly aware, really bright, and you go to the toilet and you go, wow, 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 wow. Then you know that wasn't a sleep. Or similar experiences like that. So you go into time. What's the next thing you do? You're inside the body's just kind of distant from you, and now you're inside the mind, but the mind is still complicated. The next thing which you have is this, what's it called, like thought, commentary, giving things descriptions. Honestly, all of you who see me here today, can you describe me? Who is Ajahn Brahm? You write down a few words. They're just all the very best approximations. But when the mind is silent, whatever you're looking at, you start to see deeper things, deeper realities. That's one of the wonderful things it is. Here, in this location, at night time, if you want to, after the talks are finished, you can go and lay on your back on the stupa and look at the Milky Way. You know, for many years when I first came to Australia, I could not see the Milky Way because I knew the names of all the stars. I was a member of the Astronomy Society in Cambridge. So you looked at this and that was its name, this was a globular cluster, this was a spiral galaxy, this was just a planet, this was a Singapore Airlines flight. Or whatever it was, you knew their names. Because I knew the names, I could not see the stars, if you understand what I mean. It wasn't beautiful anymore. But then I actually learned, I was very successful in that, deliberately forgot and the names of all those things you could see in the night sky. And when I didn't give anything a name, the stars up here at night time were really beautiful. Why is it we destroy beauty by giving things names? I mentioned this simile before once, not many people got it, but when I was a kid, it was one of the Grimm's fairy tales about this kind of witch or something, and she gave this gift to, was it Goldilocks? Or someone, anyway, taught her how to weave gold out of straw so she could satisfy this crazy king. But she could only be free from this curse if she could remember or say this witch or this demon's name. Yeah, that's the name of the one, yeah. You remember it, so you're free. But in those days, that was an example of once you had the name of some demon or something, or some witch, if you had the right name, then you had power over them. You could be free. And when I had the name of the stars, it's a sense I had kind of ownership, control over them. I knew what they were. And I lost their beauty. For once, I forgot all those names. They were just stars in the sky. They had their own beauty. They didn't need to know what they were or where they came from. Why do you want to do that? So instead, things like that, you can lay on your back and see and just enjoy them. You become really, really peaceful. So this is not the end of meditation, but this is becoming free from those layer of petals called naming and verbalizing thought. And you go deeper into the silence. That becomes like the next layer of petals. It happens naturally. You become silent. There's no need to give it names. That's why I'm being honest and straightforward with you. When I do guided meditations, I actually listen to what I say. And you get to about that stage in this meditation process, especially the guided meditations, and I can't go any further. It's like I'm asking you to be silent. My mind is telling me, why don't you be silent? Because the silence is so attractive. It kind of pulls me in. And I usually, at places like Nolamara, I say, I'm going to be silent now. When I speak again at the end of the meditation. I can't resist that. That's how beautiful silence is. You go into a level of petals deeper inside of you, which is way more beautiful. It's irresistible. You don't decide to do it. It pulls you in to that silence. Yeah, but then what? You got that deep into these layer of petals, and then the next thing which happens is you get pulled in even deeper inside the silence. You know what usually happens? I've talked with other people, it happens to me and it happens to most others as well. They can become aware of their breathing. Not the type of breath when you decide to watch the breath yourself. I'm going to watch it at the tip of my nose, I'm going to watch it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Not like that. Just the breath comes and it's beautiful. And it's attractive. It's already got some piti sukha to it because you've already done the preliminary stages of breath meditation. which is silence, or rather present moment awareness and silence. And the mind is really ready for it. And then as you're watching the breathing, I don't usually explain it this way, but I'm going to do it this way today, simply because to tie it more fully into the Anapanasati Sutta. For those of you who know Anapanasati, mindfulness of the breath, what does it actually say? It says, when you're breathing in a long breath, you know you're breathing in a long breath. When you're breathing out a long breath, you know you're breathing out a long breath. When you're breathing in a short breath, you know you're breathing in a short breath. When you're breathing out a short breath, you know you're breathing out a short breath. Actually, I think I got that right. I usually get so complicated, so many things. That's why when I usually translate, I said, you know when you're breathing in or breathing out, it's a long breath or a short breath. That's how I would translate it. It makes more sense, easier to understand. But then, when I started doing that as a young monk, what actually is a long breath? What is a short breath? A lot of times, when I look at my breath, it's kind of in between. Maybe like short to average, or maybe a bit long to average, but it's never really short or really long. And so that made me really confused. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to make a breath long? Or make it short? It was kind of crazy. And afterwards, you realize it doesn't matter which one it is. As long as you can be aware of the breath and just its length or whatever, that just gives you an extra little thing to be aware of to make it slightly more interesting. That's all. But that's also one of the reasons why, if any of you are ever sick or in pain, just when you're doing breathing in, breathing out energy, breathing in energy, breathing out pain. Whatever you wish to do, but keep it just one thing, simple. Breathing in peace. Breathing out tiredness. You can choose what you wish to do. And that makes it useful, but don't just do it as short as I just did, just 1 or 2 times. You have to do that for minutes, and then it works. But anyway, that's much better than breathing in, breathing out. So, the main thing is, in that first 4 stages of breath meditation, is so you're aware of the breath. The physical feeling of the breath. Doesn't say actually where, as long as you know. And eventually, fully aware of the breath. At this point I usually use this one. This is another use for this gong bonga. It's the breath. So this represents the breath. So you're now breathing in. Now you're breathing out. In, out, in, out. I can watch every breath this way. In, out. That's not good enough. You're missing so much of the breath. To get that full awareness of the breath, you watch the breath from the very beginning of the in-breath, all the way to the end of the in-breath. You can see the breath stop. And then the out-breath begin from the very beginning to the very end. You don't miss a moment. That's a full awareness of the breath. Sometimes they call it to see the whole body of the breath. The word body there is just an idiom. It means the whole of it, the whole experience. It doesn't mean you're watching your body anymore. Just you know the breath fully from beginning to end. Once that starts to happen, of course, can you actually do that? Of course you can't. It has to happen naturally. Too much force disturbs everything. Soon it becomes fascinating. I never realized that in all the breaths I breathed in my 73 and a bit years of life, never 2 breaths have ever been the same. Everyone is different. That's just how fantastic this is. And after a while, because you're so still, that's all you're doing, just watching this breath go in, breath go out. It does become fascinating. You think, no, how can you be fascinated by breath going in and going out? How can you be fascinated and go, wow, 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 do you know what's in the content of a toilet bowl? What's happening there is the mind is getting strong because you're not doing anything, and the five senses are becoming very simple. All you're watching is just this moment of breath happening now. And then the breath becomes joyful. When I first started writing about this, I used to call it the beautiful breath. These days I usually call it delightful breath, but I just wanted any readers to explain the breath actually does look delightful, it looks amazing. And it satisfies you. You're looking at this breath and wow, this is really nice. You know, when you're looking at something which is interesting you and satisfying you, then of course you stay there. You don't need any effort at all. You just can't get your mind off the breath. And that's the nice thing about it. You're kind of resting there and it's so comfortable that no one can actually make you move. Or nothing can. So you get this stability, beginning of like stillness. And then when you're watching your breath, it's delightful. And the delight gets stronger and stronger. As you start to experience the breath, not through the physical sense of touch, it's not through that sense anymore, you know it through the sense of knowing, through mind. As the Buddha said, it becomes a citta sankhara, a mind-made experience. And it gets incredibly beautiful. You're watching this breath come in and go out, and it really is, can I say it, even orgasmic? Better than that. It's one of the reasons why, if you have a relationship, be careful. You really get into this meditation, that's the end of that relationship. The meditation is way better. No problems. Anyway, I don't know if I said that properly. If you object to that, fine. All objections to anything I say, please send it to the retreat manager, Nolia. Any praises, you can send it here. Is that okay, Nolia? But anyhow, it becomes really delightful. And at that time, what do you see? It's actually more like what you're experiencing. The breath has done its job. And now you see this joy. And I said that carefully, you see the joy. In other words, you usually experience it, this beautiful light, the nimittas. You're getting that deep into the lotus. The last part of your five senses has vanished with the breath disappearing. Now you've got the mind sense working. And you usually see it as lights, nimittas. When you do, please don't get excited. You're not in control anyway. You didn't do it. If you ask them, well, if you didn't actually attain these nimittas, who did? Every time I give a talk, sometimes I was afraid of what is called labha sakara saloka, gains, honor and fame. That's what the Buddha said, be careful. Just because you give talks and many people listen to you, doesn't mean that you're a great monk, you're famous, or you're whatever. Otherwise you get into pride and arrogance. So I checked it out, and if you like my talks, it's not my talks. It's like my teachers. Monks like Ajahn Chah, Ajahn Tate, the Buddha himself, all these people who guided me in those early years. They created this thing you see in front of you called Brahm. And any talks or wisdom I give, I can actually check, and yeah, that came from Ajahn Chah. So you don't have to be afraid of this. It's just all my teachers who guided me give the talk. When the Buddha taught, who was talking? That was mostly his former teachers. Buddha Kassapa. I can explain this afterwards if you like, but you can get the text out if you like. It's in the sutras. The Buddha in his previous life, or a previous life, was Jyotipala, a monk under Kassapa the Buddha. Never wanted to become a Buddha at first. Never wanted to become a monk. But when he saw Kassapa the Buddha, he wanted to ordain, and it was ordained as a bhikkhu. And then would have got something off, certainly get all those teachings from Kassapa the Buddha, the former Buddha. But anyway, that's a bit different than a 1,000-petal lotus. But anyway, as you go into the lotus, you go into the beautiful layers of petals. You don't do anything. What are you doing anyway? All you're doing is being aware and being kind. You say that's what you do, aware and kind. But it's not actually what you do. That's just, just trying to almost trick you into think you're doing something. Kindness, you can't do kindness. You just let go and the kindness is all there. The same with being aware. It's a natural state for the human being, especially when they stop going somewhere or being somewhere. You know what John Lennon said, life is what's happened. No, life is what's happening when you're busy doing something else, or something like that. When you're not doing something else, you're actually here. It's almost like a default state, I keep saying. And once you get into that default state, it gets very lovely. Like looking at the stars at night, or sitting down there blissing out. And when it happens, you realize how powerful these states are. Of course, I haven't finished yet. There's more inside that lotus, but you're doing pretty good. And I mention this because years ago I used to call it like pivot points of meditation. Once you're going inside this moment, and you're being quiet, in a silence, and you're feeling joy, then basically just you got far enough that joy will take you deeper automatically. So pivot point becomes an automatic process. You can't resist it. You just want to do it. It draws you into it. The way the Buddha said in the sutras, he says, when these states come close, the mind leaps onto them. You don't. You don't do anything. You just watch as the mind just jumps onto these beautiful, beautiful vehicles to take you deep inside the mind without any fear, enjoying. And the number of benefits to this is enormous, especially for health. So many times you've seen people really sick. So many times they can just, because maybe they have to, they get into these deep meditations because they've got no choice. And they don't have any choice anyway. It motivates them to go deep. And when they do, there's so many solutions to the problems which they had. I hope that's got lots of questions coming. I shouldn't have said I hope you do, because I didn't even finish the ones last night. But nevertheless, we'll try our best for tonight and for the interview times as well. That's only part one of the 1,000-petal lotus. I needed a few petals, and there's 1,000 of them, and a few more. So anyway, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Oh, that's nice. Okay, thank you for listening. Please remember, any complaints? Normally, no, you can't complain to me. Excellent. I wish you a happy morning, if you want. Totally optional. You can be miserable if you like.